Welcome, everyone. Really appreciate you joining us today for the webinar, Tee Up Your Business for the Long Drive. My name is Maureen Schlemp, and I'm the Director of Marketing Programs here at MobileDemand. I'll be your host today, and I'll be introducing each of our presenters, administering some of the poll questions, and I'll also be assisting with the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to begin with our introduction of our first speaker today. Jon Rasmussen is the Senior Director of Product Management at MobileDemand. He has over 30 years of experience in the AIDC industry. We like to call him Yoda around here. Jon has worked for NORAD, Welch Allyn, Car Technologies, and Intermec before coming to MobileDemand. So he's developed a deep knowledge of the various products and technologies used by mobile workers in the field and expertise in many industries. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jon.
Thanks, Maureen, and welcome everybody. Our agenda today is to go through and cover kind of where's the economy going, or what's happening with businesses, kind of what's setting up and driving it based on some research and information from various sources out there. Then to go into some of the technology advances that are key to note and to understand, and a little bit about the user needs. And then we're going to go in with David Krebs on total cost ownership, but he's going to preface that with some additional elements from research that they've done and published just a couple of months ago that will give you a feel for what's happening in the marketplace, especially around tablets, and what's really driving things for solutions for businesses out there. And then we'll conclude with Stacy Morin going through Great State Beverages experience, and she's got a lot of good words of wisdom for you out there. So we want to make sure you're tied in, and we want to thank everybody for your feedback prior to this about what we'd like covered. We'll not be able to hit everybody's issues that they put out there simply because some got pretty specific for your businesses. But certainly any follow-on questions, we would be glad to answer and be able to go further in depth that would affect your business as opposed to our broader audience here today. But we'll definitely get into what are the trends and what's happening and the real experience out there and how to sell it. So the first element up is we're all familiar with the Great Recession. We've all lived through it, and you, those of you out there with businesses, congratulations on being able to survive it. We all know the housing bubble was the thing that burst and really set everything in motion across the globe. And some of the hardest hit markets were Phoenix and San Francisco and Las Vegas. But as you can see, this year, those prices and values are going up pretty significantly now, so that's a pretty good sign that we're out of the recession. But what happened during it? Those of you who have been through it know that you had to squeeze costs out of savings because you haven't been able to generate the revenue and the growth. So the best way to keep your businesses rolling and going was to really, really get cutting with your costs and effective. But what you've got now is a very lean organization running with fewer workers and be able to address your business. And it doesn't look like there's significant hiring coming out of it, so everybody's going at this pretty lean. But it's good to note that projected growth over the year is 3.3%. I know if you're in the top 25 of Gartner's supply chain, you're expecting to grow at a much more rapid rate than what our general economy is doing here. So specifically heading up well over 4 to 50%, depending on who you are in that list. But the key thing in there is businesses are flourishing as they're coming out of the economy. So coming out of the Great Recession, cut as far as you can. Now is the time to focus on growing your revenue and how are you going to do that. So we've got kind of a first survey here go through and to get your feedback and priorities. So we're going to stage it up here and then get your results rolling in with that so we talk and see where everybody's coming at from that baseline to make sure that we've got everybody starting at the same point. Polls.
Right. Go.
All right. Well, let's close the poll and see what the results are. Okay. As you can see, we've got 72% focusing on growing revenue, 31% at improving customer satisfaction, 55% implementing innovative services and offerings, and 3% came in on laptops. That's kind of an interesting one. So, we'll go back and correlate it to what's happening out there in the market and end user surveys over a wide variety of industries here, including healthcare, retail, and the supply chain. And where are people really talking? Growing revenue. Your number one is obviously the big thing that's come out this year and driving towards it. Improving customer satisfaction, being able to hit them with services and the right products at the right time. So new service offerings are a great way to grow that. But also providing visibility in the supply chain and getting the details so you can better manage your business. That was one of the top things that came out of Gartner's top 25 supply chains is they want to go even deeper to understand the cost to serve for each of their customers. And to do that, you have to have visibility, and in order to have visibility, you have to have solutions out there with your mobile workers. And then finally, improving efficiency. I'm not sure that ever really goes away. But what are people talking about to provide innovation for your business? There are things like collaboration, what's going on with the cloud, sensors, bring your own devices to work, image processing, RFID round 2, speech and voice. There's a lot of things flowing out there and people exploring a lot of different technologies based on a bunch of the advances that have come around from the latest round of smartphones and tablets in the space. And so how do you understand it? How is all that going to fit and feel, in the environment? So I'm going to focus on a couple of the key foundational ones today because obviously we don't have time to hit all of those and be able to explore as to why those are really important. The first thing I've chosen to focus on is the Intel Core i5 processor because a lot of the competitive devices for consumer products out there are ARM-based devices. And they lack the performance and the digital signal processing capabilities to be able to address advanced features. Now you'll look at the list and you'll say, well, there aren't a lot of those features I'm going to be using out there now relative to video and 3D and HD and all that from a mobile perspective, but it's indicative of the processing power and the capabilities moving forward to give you some advances. So if you look at it, FFT is fast Fourier transformations and MFLOPS. You don't need to understand the formulas, you don't need to understand the math, but it's a key measurement for digital signal processing, which is essential to have if you're going to handle voice and image processing technologies in your environment. And that's the trend in the future and where the advances are going to go, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But also understanding you've got serious horsepower coming out here in a mobile platform that's the equivalent of what you're driving on desktops now. So literally being able to develop on your desktop and deploy it out there and give you the performance and the features you need and expect to innovate with your business going forward. The next element is like the Atom processor, the N2600. NA Software Limited is a company that focuses on digital signal processing for defense applications and has done some great benchmarks out here. And the key here is it's MFLOPS per watt. In other words, it's a very powerful platform, not as powerful as an i5, but as a battery consumption level, you can do smaller, lighter products with it, yet you still preserve that capability. So remember that DSP. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. Going out there and understanding, where things are heading from a business perspective, Windows 8 is coming down the pipe, and then you've got Windows 8.1 that Microsoft is talking about that gives further improvements. The key to understand out here is it's really designed about businesses migrating your applications going forward, but giving you that modern interface that have made those consumer tablets so successful out there from a consumer adoption perspective and what businesses are looking to bring in. And Dave Krebs is going to go a little more deeper into that element and what businesses are looking for. But the keys up here are understanding from a business perspective is that security, that BitLocker Defender capability, going with HTML5, which if you don't understand that, that's if you've got a browser-based application. yet you want some offline processing capabilities in case you don't have coverage. HTML5 delivers that if you have an application that's been developed on it. Microsoft Cloud, being able to deliver cloud functionality, so when you have connection, you're able to get at the data you need, and then improving the rest of the steps to go about managing devices in the environment. Obviously, Microsoft will put a lot more out there for Windows 8. But I'd like to talk about wide area radio technologies. So 3G, 4G, LTE, things are rapidly changing. Rollouts are happening across the country, but this always takes time. And you're always confused about what technology do I need where, and how can I be more flexible with who's providing it for me. So there are really three flexible options beyond just doing an integrated radio in the solution. One is to use USB radio modems that can actually drop into a device. You could see them going through USB ports coming out the sides of people's laptops. Well, we've actually created a module that encloses it, makes it rugged and sealed, but gives you the flexibility with porous screws to be able to go out there, upgrade it, and get a very cost-effective solution that's much lower in terms of rates and lower in terms of acquisition prices. Then there's MiFi and Wi-Fi access point technologies out there that would leverage your Wi-Fi radios to hop over and get you out over the wide area network that delivers potentially multiple users. So understanding your business and your application, if you have multiple users in an area, this could be a very significant leverage point for you. And lastly, there's internet sharing with smartphones. So there's a number of ways of solving the technology without necessarily locking you into an integrated solution. Imaging, and this is where I'm bringing it back around, digital signal processing. Cameras are essentially sensors. Sensors with a lot of resolution and paths, and they're actually coming up with 3D sensor type capability, which is more kind of a time of flight, so you can get a depth going on it, as well as illumination sources. And these are the advancing pieces out there. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Xbox 360 and the Kinect functionality that basically eliminates the need to go handle remote controls and manipulating it. It's actually using a 3D sensor and infrared laser to go out there and sense where your body's at and sense what's going on. As well as, if you look at illumination sources coming up that give you basically holographic type capabilities for presentations, the combination of those two pieces is going to yield us a future not to go identifying people, but more to go identifying objects from a business-to-business perspective. And edge detection software that goes in and analyzes what those 3D sensors and those dot clouds by the illumination sources are going to deliver will allow you to identify products and volumes and sizes, and therefore improve the precision of your business, especially in the transportation industry and space. This all requires that processing power, that digital signal processing capability. So to preserve for the innovation going forward, you need to make sure you've got that capability in devices that you're deploying. Speech is the same thing. Analog to digital signal conversion, and how do you process it? So doing things like 3D voice processing, Siri-like apps, we've all seen it, all been enamored with it. There's obviously some shortcomings. Most of it has to do with how do you deal with the noise going on in the environment, getting it down to what you really perceive as the value of what's coming in, and then translating that into activities and data and input coming in. So having that digital signal processing capability, it enables those software enhancements to be able to deliver solutions, and solutions that are going to work in a mobile world out there. So those are the main ones I really wanted to canvas today. All of that being said, rugged devices, things with IP65 ratings for handling snow, rain, cold temperatures, 5-foot drops, and tumble test. That's how you survive in the real world. You make it a tool for the user, and you provide them the other peripherals they need to make their jobs easier in the environment, whether it's mag stripe readers for taking credit cards or identification cards, USB expansion modules for wide area, mounts for usage in vehicles and on forklifts. Those types of things are essential to make a job productive, and those things will add up as well into the initial acquisition costs if they exist, which they don't for a lot of the consumer-based devices. So those are the things to really look at, and the trends and things to understand and this is where ruggedness will come into play. And now we've got a second survey out there for you. If you can go through and respond to it, what kind of devices are you looking at deploying in your company? So we'll give you some time for the results to come in. And looks like we've got about 2/3 of the people all weighed in. Okay, about 3/4. Well, there we go. Can you get the sharing? Okay. 57% are looking at fully rugged, 26% at semi-rugged, and 17% are looking at consumer grade. Well, that's definitely what we like to hear. And we'll go and advance on to David Krebs for going through and providing you with the information that you need to know and understand for a true analysis to give to your business and make it quantifiable.
So before we have David do his presentation, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information on David. He has more than 10 years of experience covering the market for enterprise and government mobility solutions, wireless data communication technologies, and automatic data capture research and consulting. His focus is on identifying the key drivers and enablers in the adoption of mobile and wireless solutions among mobile workers in the extended enterprise. David conducts market research on market sizing and forecasting, total cost of ownership, product evaluations, and more. We're really glad to have David here today to present the findings from VDC's most recent total cost of ownership study that was published in March of this year. Have you given the control? So let me just pass over controls here. David, you should be able to take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Maureen. Thanks, John. And thanks to everyone who's listening in today. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Really happy to be participating on this panel and share a couple of our insights with regard to some of the trends that we're seeing in enterprise adoption of tablets, and more specifically around cost of ownership and what our research has revealed. So the tablet form factor is there's a couple of things going on. First of all, it's not new to the enterprise. Tablets have been used for several years now, if not a decade or two, in what you would consider sort of more line of business and niche-oriented spaces and environments, and have been doing so successfully. However, what we have certainly witnessed recently, as a result of certainly the developments by some of the consumer technology icons, is sort of a renaissance of this form factor. And as a result of the exposure, if you will, and the success of media pads that everyone has, or most everyone has had experience with, we have witnessed sort of a rising of the tide, if you will, in terms of tablet technology. And so we're seeing obviously a very rapid adoption curve of tablet technologies and of tablets within the enterprise. And one of the things that is clear and that is evident is that tablets are taking on a pretty broad spectrum of use cases and a pretty broad spectrum of applications, including the displacement in certain environments of notebooks. So that's certainly one of the early observations and perhaps smaller surprises that we've seen in this space. One of the things that is important to note is that there is, and we'll be talking about this throughout my portion of the discussion, there is a difference between consumer technologies and enterprise technologies. And at the same time, there's been this theme or this trend around consumerization and what it means to the enterprise user. Clearly, there has been the phenomenon of individuals bringing their devices to work, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet, and enterprises supporting those. But I think in the context of your line of business worker and in the context of what we would consider more mission and business critical applications, the important takeaway here is consumerization is not so much about taking a consumer device and using it for these workflows, but it's really about the introduction of the ease of use and the user interface and the user experience that has been so successful on consumer devices, and introducing that or interpreting that in an enterprise type of application, type of deployment. And I think there's clearly an important distinction to be made there. And then there are also distinctions that John had alluded to with regard to the capabilities of sort of more media pad-oriented devices and tablets. And again, this is ultimately going to be a function of the applications and the applications that you're going to be looking to support. There's a lot that one can do with media pads, but there is some limitation in terms of processing capabilities. There are some limitations in terms of the functional capabilities of the device that need to be considered when thinking about next generation solutions. Maureen, I don't know if you can help me out here. I'm having a hard time advancing the slides. So if you could be my driver and advance the slides when I tell you, that would be great.
Sure, no problem.
So if we could get to the next slide, please.
Which slide are you looking for, David? You might be having some difficulties.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties on my end, and I just have to re-log in. Based on I just got kicked off of the network that I'm on. I apologize.
Okay. Do you want to go to your OS consideration slide?
Yep. So
okay.
Just
we've got that one up.
One of the things that is extremely important to consider when looking at enterprise applications is that there are specific capabilities that you need to take into consideration also from an OS perspective. Clearly, there are a lot of capabilities that sort of these newer, more modern, perhaps consumer OSs bring to the table. However, at the same time, there are limitations in terms of some of the issues that they have in these spaces, especially issues with regard to security capabilities, especially with regard to lifecycle management is a big one in terms of OS considerations, especially when you're thinking about how to manage these version controls in these spaces. Version control being a critical consideration and a critical concern in these environments. So you really have to think about also the back-end integration and application integration, and that not all platforms are created the same, and you really need to consider your enterprise requirements and enterprise use cases when looking at mobile OSs. Okay, so it seems to be I'm back on. And then beyond, apologize for that technical snafu, beyond OS considerations, I think it's also important to think about the environments that these devices are going to be used in. These are line of business workers that are supporting very critical and mission-critical, business-critical applications for their organizations. And a lot of times they are in outdoor conditions, outdoor environments. And these are often afterthoughts. When selecting mobile devices for a use case in transportation or direct store delivery or field service application, but very frequently these are used in either direct sunlight or in high ambient light conditions. A lot of times they're used with gloved hands. A lot of times there's humid or rain conditions that are is driving moisture on the display. And we need to be able to support those, and we need to have a device that can withstand these capabilities. Another one is temperature. It doesn't even have to be extreme temperatures, but a lot of consumer devices will be pre-programmed to shut down once they reach a certain temperature limit. and will not be functional again until they're in a temperature range that is comfortable for them. And again, that translates to disruption in workflows. That translates to issues with regard to the way that these devices are being used. So it's extremely important to consider sort of the environmental conditions that these devices are going to be used in before making an investment decision. But as I said before, the tablet is really receiving a lot of interest as a platform for mobile workers. And what the tablet does, again, with any form factor, you're going to have, there's going to be some issues that you're going to need to address. But what the tablet does and potential vulnerabilities, the tablet really is a really nice balance between sort of the portability of even a hand-holdable device, mobile device, while offering a very rich, and a multimedia-capable large display in a powerful package. So I think it's not surprising that we're seeing organizations increasingly look at tablets as a strategic computing and communications platform for their frontline workers. And in fact, in a recent survey that we did, about 6 in 10 organizations perceive tablets as either very or extremely strategic to their line of business operations and line of business use cases. So getting to cost of ownership and getting to some of these use cases. And again, one thing that I want to make sure that everyone on the line understands is we're really not talking about horizontal adoption of tablets within the enterprise. We're really talking about a subset of users here. We're talking about line of business. We're talking about frontline users, service technicians, delivery drivers, shop floor employees that are really very highly mobile in terms of their workflows, but also supporting applications that are critical to the operation of their business, both from a productivity and efficiency standpoint, and also increasingly from a customer service and customer engagement standpoint. In other words, these devices need to operate when the user accesses them. And one of the key functions or key criteria that we look at in terms of evaluating devices for these workflows, for these applications, is do they hold up to the rigors of that application, of the environment, of the use case. And that is translated into failure ultimately. And what are the failure rates of these devices? And what we've seen, especially with sort of the excitement around some of these sort of newer consumer platforms entering the enterprise, we've seen really a bump in failure rates of consumer devices in these spaces. So here, again, we're comparing line of business applications between rugged and non-rugged devices, with obvious nuances within that. So we're seeing a pretty significant delta between rugged tablets and non-rugged tablets. And quite frankly, we've even seen failure rates exceed 30, 40, if not 50%, based on sort of the environments that they've been deployed in. Later on, Stacy is going to share some of her organization's personal experiences with that. So failure is really sort of the catalyst that contributes and will drive and will impact cost of ownership most significantly. So what is failing? And there are really a number of things that are failing with these devices. But when you're looking at sort of the leading symptoms of device failure, clearly the display is the most vulnerable element of these devices. The cracked display, something that I'm sure we've all experienced with our personal devices, with our consumer devices. If you drop it, on the pavement or have it hit a sharp edge. So cracked display is a significant issue. But then beyond that, we're certainly seeing software failures and the integration and the way that software is integrated in the device and is managed with the device. We're seeing failures around some of the keyboards and keypads, assuming the device has one. Wireless radios, again, here we want to make sure that these radios are enterprise class radios and that we don't lose the connection frequently. And then, with the increased use of peripherals and accessories, we're also seeing those as a point of failure. And really what's happening fundamentally is, that these devices are being dropped inadvertently by their users. And again, the use cases frequently will will contribute to that. These are guys that are going in or ladies that will go in and out of trucks frequently. Will put the device on top of an asset that they might be servicing, and the opportunity for it to be dropped, the opportunity for it to be knocked on the floor is certainly increased. So that's really what's happening with these devices. And then beyond that, we're seeing things like water exposure, liquid exposure, and then temperature issues, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a number of factors that are driving this. So when we're looking at cost of ownership, fundamentally when we create our models, the distinction that we're making, and quite frankly the most difficult aspect of it, is that we're looking at it from the perspective of hard versus soft cost. The hard costs are the ones that are easy to compute and calculate. What does it cost to acquire this device, load the application, deploy the device to my frontline workers? The more challenging aspect of a cost of ownership, or at least an effective cost of ownership model, is understanding the soft costs. Not so much training, that can be easily understood, but really ultimately what does it cost to operate these devices? What happens when the device does fail? And what type of exposure does my organization feel as a result of lost wages, lost revenues, lost productivity, and this overall disruption from an operational standpoint? So those are significantly different. And ultimately, what happens is when a device fails, a lot of these mission-critical workers, line workers, it's not that they can't do what they're doing in the field, but they're just much less effective at doing so. I'm sure there are manual overrides for a lot of the applications that they're supporting, but it just takes longer. Applications that require real-time information to input in the system so that other operations can either fill orders or work, because there's sort of this domino effect in terms of the input of information on these mobile devices in the field. They're disrupted. So there's certainly some significant things happening there. So again, as a result of these failures, we're seeing fairly significant deltas in between the cost of ownership of rugged versus non-rugged devices, a little bit over a 2x factor as a result of these deployments. So while there is appeal from a lower upfront deployment cost, ultimately those costs later down the road catch up with the organization because of failure, because of disruption to processes. And really this graph sort of evidences it most clearly. IT support and productivity costs cost for about 90% of cost of ownership. So it really doesn't have that much to do with the upfront deployment cost. It's really about the productivity loss, and it's really about the IT support costs to make sure that the device that does fail is managed properly and gets back up and running. So these are obviously some pretty stark models. So just in summary, just want to make sure that I reemphasize some of the points, and again, apologies for some of the technical issues that I had earlier in the discussion. As John had mentioned, I mean, we are coming out of the recession, but we are still in an area or in an environment where there is some very, very strong sort of budget pressures. And especially, these are not insignificant investments when we're looking at sort of the investment of, rugged mobile solutions and enterprise mobility solutions in general. So, the need for strong metrics to validate investments and track results are clearly a clearly important requirement, especially from the perspective of cost of ownership and ROI. Reliability, robustness for line of business applications is absolutely paramount. There needs to be peace of mind. You really don't want to be having a lot of conversations with your IT support staff. These devices need to operate, almost 24/7. Consumerization of IT, I think it's a very important trend, clearly. But with respect to what impact it has for line of business or for some of these environments where MobileDemand and the devices that they're creating are used in, it's really not about taking a consumer device, putting some bumpers around it, and deploying that. It's really about taking what we've learned from ease of use, ease of intuitive design from an application standpoint, and translating that on these enterprise devices. And then finally, again, look at the environment. Look at, where this mobile worker is working, what type of conditions they're being exposed to make sure that we're aligning the right mobile solution with the target user and the jobs that they've been tasked to support. So with that, I'll throw it back over to you, Maureen.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we have the third and final survey, that poll that we would like to have you answer. This is the last poll question, and it's to help us gauge how important TCO is to your company at this time as it relates to assessing mobile devices. So if we can get the poll is up, and if you can just take a couple of seconds here to submit your answers, and I would say maybe about 5 more seconds or so, and I think it's a good time to close the poll and to show the results. So the poll results, about 9% saying that it's not a consideration, 56% saying it's a discussion point, and 35% saying that it's very important and that you do have metrics now to measure improvement. So that's terrific. Thanks for answering that last question. And with that, I'd like to just introduce our third presenter today. Stacy Morin has more than 7 years of experience in IT and information systems, providing support for internal data, mobile solutions, and the interaction between the two. 5 of those years were in the education field, and 2 have been in beverage distribution. Stacy's has seen successful results in integration of technologies in both of these fields through planning, training, implementing, and maintaining several different software and hardware applications and configurations. And we're delighted that she's able to join us today to share her story with you. So with that, I will turn the controls over to Stacy. Stacy, you should be ready to go.
Awesome. How you doing, everybody? Give you a quick bio on Great State Beverages. We're a premium beverage distributor, and we service New Hampshire, the southern central part of the state, including the cities of Manchester, Hooksett, and Londonderry. We also have a rather large soda division that also uses rugged devices, but my focus here today is on our Anheuser-Busch salesmen. After 5 years in education, I thought kids couldn't beat up equipment. Well, salesmen do a better job. So that kind of leads me to where I am now. When I hopped on board here 2 years ago, the devices that the beer salesmen were using were reaching their end of life. And I'm also having a problem adjusting my slides here. Oh,
Can you
there
see
we go.
The slide?
Oh, now we go. It just took a minute. The salesmen were looking for a more modern device. They were on old, like, mini laptops that, were dying a slow and painful death. So we had a few options to explore. The specs that we needed were pretty simple. The mobility software that Anheuser-Busch uses to enter orders and upload them into our root accounting software system really just needed a Windows platform to run on. So, not knowing how hard salesmen were on their equipment, I ordered up a few HP tablets, which were quickly destroyed, mostly, as pointed out before, from cracked displays, drops and falls that occurred out in the field. But they also did not fare well in the environment, the New England environment. In and out of hot and cold, and in and out of coolers all day long. There were definite latency problems associated with them, and it prompted me to quickly, kind of ask around to other distributorships and Anheuser-Busch specifically on what are other people using, because this obviously is not going to be cost-effective for us. Anheuser-Busch then recommended us to seek out MobileDemand and its rugged tablets. So I did, and I was very pleased with the responsiveness of their sales associates. They got back to me promptly, even provided me with a trial unit to try it out in the field and see what I thought about it. And the decision was really quite easy after that. You know, we purchased up 10, one for each of our salesmen, and that was 2 years ago. So we're still running strong. Some of the things I would also point out, not just running the mobility software and being able to get our orders up on time, but you know, some of the other uses that we have, you know, checking their email, you know, showing sell sheets to customers, using it as a sales tool and not just an order entry device. What I think is important to point out is how important it really is to stay up and running in our industry. It really all starts, the whole cycle of an order starts with the pre-sale salesman who needs to get that order up into the system. If that doesn't happen and it doesn't happen on time, that means we can't route the orders. And if we can't route the orders, we can't print the pick tickets for the trucks, and then now we have preload warehouse employees standing around waiting to do their job, and the whole cycle of our business comes to a screeching halt if we can't get our orders up in a timely manner. So it's very important that these devices work, and they work well, and that they remain reliable. Yeah, we've been in business now with these for 2 years, and you know, if anybody's going to give it a run for its money, it's going to be my AV guys. I can tell you that. You know, they're in the thick of it. I think every test of ruggedness out there is probably definitely being executed by those guys. You know, they're tossing them on the passenger side of the car, they're in and out of the coolers, they're in and out of rain. You know, New England is, you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. And never had a problem. You know, the only maintenance I've had to do on these units were purely software, and they just plain work. And that makes me very happy, because it's not always the case on the soda side of the house. So that's about it. That's my story. I'm very happy with the decision that I made with MobileDemand, and I guarantee that you know, as the life cycle ends on these current units, I'll be graduating to the next. Although I think I got a couple years to go with these before I have to start thinking about that. And again, I can't advance my slide. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate that. And if you could give the keyboard and mouse back to me, you would just click on the Give Keyboard and Mouse, and then.
Let me see. Oh, here.
Yep.
I can't see where to do that.
That's okay. I think I actually was able to do it from here. No problem.
Okay, good.
Okay, so this is we're winding down here on the presentation component, and we will be answering some questions here shortly. But John just has a few additional comments here.
Yeah, the key things to note on this, you know, Stacy did an excellent job of summarizing where they were at, and David, you know, heavy focus on the cost and the operations, but some of the other areas depending upon your business that you need to consider about is, you know, what's going to happen out of stocks when you have downtime going on, you know, for your consumer goods doing direct store delivery. You know, what's happening to your first time fix situation if you don't have the right set of information and pieces in your technician's hands. You're not going to meet your service level agreements. You know, customer satisfaction is going to drop. Employee retention is a big thing. You know, what happens to the employees now that, you know, some jobs are opening up again and they're getting irritated by the equipment? They are going to tend to look to move on if they keep having failures and problems. And, you know, data is key to moving the business forward. If suddenly you aren't getting the right data and the right pieces in, then you're going to get in trouble with your inventories and your fulfillments, and insufficient battery life. We even talked to a customer who actually had gone out and deployed iPads, and they actually left them in their vehicle because they didn't have enough battery life to get through a day if they took them out, and they didn't have coverage back in the freezers, when they were working. So, it's really critical, and Dave did an excellent job pointing out what the issues are, but the impact to productivity is almost unmeasurable at that point. And then theft. Believe it or not, more people are going to go out there and steal an iPad from a mobile worker than they're going to come out and steal a MobileDemand tablet. We always, feel a little bit bad about it that they wouldn't go after ours, but needless to say, when they see consumer devices, that's an issue. Now, we're going to roll into some questions, so please feel free to enter additional questions you have. But we've got a little video here, so you aren't just staring at this screen for the rest of it, that we want to play, that will show what ruggedness really happens and what can go on with our devices. So if you can just tab over to the. So what's going to happen actually for rugged devices out there in the environment, and what can actually happen, and what we do for testing for those devices to make sure they're going to survive out there, because the issue is you've got to have that survivability. So what's the testing and everything that's going to go through and give you that capability? One of the questions came in and asked if your tablets go beyond IP65. Well, part of that is, are you going to go submersive? And IP67 would be like if you're going to work underwater. 65 is sealed and rugged. So you can see what our devices go through here, and certainly an industry first in the tumble test here we have going on with the T7200. It'll look a lot better if you go out to YouTube and do it directly rather than us running it here and sending it out there, but just wanted to give you those capabilities to see what's actually going on. One of the side questions was about VPNs, and specifically on Windows 8, there is a VPN client on there, and you can configure it up to be secure with your business, no matter which avenue you're actually going over to do your communications with your corporate environment, so you can provide a secure setting. Some of the other questions are pretty specific. Stacy, there's a kind of a question for you here. Have you experienced, or did you get the threat of user turnover when they actually started having some breakage and failures with the consumer devices?
Well, there's always, the threat of frustration, with technology. I'm not sure if I had guys ready to, quit because their notebooks weren't working. But yeah, definitely it adds to the frustration on the job. And I think if I had allowed it to persist over time, then it very well could happen. Luckily, though, I was able to find a solution here with the MobileDemand, pretty quickly and effectively, so I didn't actually have that happen. But yeah, I mean, you got to imagine that you deal with the same frustration over and over and over again. At any point in your job, it's going to frustrate you. It's my job to make sure that it's not technology that pushes you off the bridge.
That's a good answer. One for you, David, came in, had to do with the details on the analysis and wanting to know whether you had something that was more detailed out there and available for the general public.
Yeah, I mean, we have reports that are much more in depth. This was just sort of a teaser in terms of the information. We have analysis that is certainly form factor, environment, and application specific. So I just I would just invite you to come to our website or to contact me directly, with questions about how to access that.
Yeah, and actually to add to what David's done with the research, we did some extra analysis, and we have a really quick TCO calculator tool out on the web on our website. You can find that pretty readily in resources and also on the main page. We are in the midst of updating that with David's most current information and data out there, so you can plug in and you can play with some numbers on pricing and put a little factor in there for on a conservative basis. And then for those of you having to get out and do a more in-depth presentation to your management on actual total cost of ownership and the details behind it, then you've got the ability to contact one of our sales guys, and they can do a full-up report that would go with it as well. Another question that came in was, what about Windows CE mobile devices, and are they ARM-type processors? Yes, they are. Most of the mobile devices out there have ARM processors inside of it, and they run basically a subset of the software that you're seeing today, and that roadmap is a little more fuzzy where they're at. Having come from that industry and space, I know there were some challenges that Microsoft was putting out there, but with the advances that are coming out on the full desktop type operating systems, you have a lot more flexibility, a lot more power going forward, especially with those particular processors that you're going to find in tablet computers. And that's really why we went out and selected those, is to make sure they can go forward with your business. Got a question for you, Stacy. They were asking what devices you actually had before you switched to the ruggedized tablets, so I guess pre the Hewlett-Packard tablets.
They were running on Fujitsu Lifebooks, which at the time, gosh, I'm not even sure when they were purchased. It was long before I started here at Great State. But at the time, that was the recommended platform from Anheuser-Busch, and they ran okay. They were wrapped in a somewhat ruggedized case that was more canvas rather than rubber or anything more durable. They did okay. They had to be sent in for repairs a couple of times for a couple of different issues. But they, had just reached end of life. They were just dying. We couldn't keep a battery charged to save our souls, and it was really just time to move on.
Okay.
Oh, great.
And I know there have been a number of requests for copies of the presentation. We'll definitely get that out. But certainly, like I say, would invite you to go out to our website for the calculators and analysis. And more detail, and certainly contact us. We'll be glad to help you work it through and help you convince your management of what the right thing to do is for your business. So with that, we have no more questions. So I would like to thank David and Stacy for their time today and being able to share with your audience. Your contributions have been greatly appreciated, and I'm sure all the attendees out there really appreciate your insight and firsthand experience and the depth of your experience in the industry. So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. You as well.
Muted.